is the Our Earth Certified Birth and Postpartum Attendant Training Retreat. We have a 16-week online course that is designed to prepare anyone who is interested and over the age of 18 to serve their community members through all pregnancy outcomes, through postpartum care, and through some of the needs that come up in the early stages of parenting. I became interested in doula work originally after having my first baby and experiencing some things in the hospital that I learned later were not needed. And so I became curious about other ways to have babies and to support people with the least interventions possible. And that's expanded because like sometimes we need doctors, right? Sometimes we need pathologists. Sometimes there's something going on in our bodies that we're not aware of, and we need that medical intervention. But childbirth is a natural experience, right? And so even though sometimes there are complications, the majority of the time we don't need medical intervention, we need support. And so these students are being trained to support community members really with whatever they need during the childbearing years. Like this program lived in my head, but I also shared it with some close loved ones of mine and friends and community members, and they kind of said like, Tintawi, like, why don't you get this on paper? And I stalled, and I started talking to people who really were interested, and they put me in contact with New Mexico Doula Association and the Danae Breastfeeding Collaborative, and the women, Amanda Singer and Melissa Marie, were extremely excited and supportive and understanding that we needed this in our communities. And they opened their arms and said, like, we have funding and we want to support you with this. And so that's how our students became funded, completely funded to take this training. So they're all on full scholarship. As part of that training, because it's online, it seemed incredibly important for us to connect and to build, make closer relations, and really to feel that, we're a family. Um, we needed to have in-person time. Our students are across the state, so we have some that are 4 hours, 5 hours away from Santa Fe, which is where I live. We have students in Las Cruces and Albuquerque and on pueblos like Santo Domingo Pueblo. And so we're all spread out throughout the state, which is what's needed. But in order to connect, to build family, to get hands-on training, to play around with tinctures, to um, really just connect, we needed in-person time. And so we decided that we would work with the community college and also with the local elder named Cece Todford. And Cece Todford is a chef in our community. I'll let her tell her story. But she has a pretty amazing story of serving the community, and also she was a pregnant disabled mom, and she's still a mom, but she had some challenges many challenges during her pregnancy, because we don't people with disabilities that are pregnant are invisible in our society. You don't see them in advertisements, you don't see them in the media, you don't hear about them talked in trainings. And so we wanted to highlight the importance of inclusivity and bringing everyone in. So we have presenters with all different abilities, all different backgrounds, and we also have students of all different abilities and backgrounds, because all of these communities are important and all of them need support, and they're all our family.
Yeah.
So equality means we all have access to the same things. So if we have a disabled pregnant person and we have somebody that does not have any disabilities, if they have access to the same thing, that's equality, right? But it doesn't really mean it's justice, right? Because if you take somebody that's standing and you put them by a fence and you take a smaller and they can see over the fence, right? Then it's accessible because they can see. If you take a smaller child and you have that child standing next to that adult at the same fence, the child can't see. To make it equal, you can put them on a platform and then they can be at the same level so they can both see over the fence. That's equality. It's not necessarily justice, right? Justice means justice also involves accessibility. It involves an understanding of someone's culture. Because what if both people are at the same height at that fence, but one can read and one can't? Then it's not equality. So same thing with birth work. It's not equality if, yes, there's a prenatal clinic in my town, and anybody can come to this prenatal clinic. So it's looked at as inclusive, right? But not everybody has transportation to get there. Not everyone is treated the same once they get there. Not everyone is um, treated as an individual. And in order to really build healthy relationships, and in order to really say that, this is justice, we have to know the people we're working with.
Birth equity, of course, for me is just equality all everywhere. Everyone receives the same care. Everyone's listened to in the same ways. Certain things aren't just pushed to the side. Um, Pain and complications and things like that. Birth justice is for me more of the fight for it, and really the educational part, and the recognition that this is a problem and fighting for that.
To me, birth equity is just as in anything with to do with equality and how we support our patients and clients with the same quality of healthcare and the same procedures and protocols. Birth justice is sort of more across the board, honoring everybody's wishes and desires, but also um, looking at the inequalities and equity that we procedures and protocols that we utilize with certain demographics and populations. um, Social justice is like a big part of equity and equality, and in regards to making sure that everybody is receiving like good quality care. But we see that like diminish significantly in our BIPOC communities, and their outcomes are um, also worse than those that are non people of color.
In thinking about how to be strategic and moving forward in this work, again, this is not my field, but looking at it from a diversity specialist perspective, number one, we need more doulas. What was unique about this program and this retreat is this is not just preparing people to be a doula. This is preparing people to be culturally sensitive, traditionally respectful, embracing and incorporating of indigenous and proven traditional practices, so that when they go out into the communities to provide care as a doula, they're dealing with their clients from a holistic perspective. So I don't think it's sufficient to just have more doulas. We have to have more appropriately trained and prepared doulas. And from a strategic standpoint, I firmly believe we're at a stage and a space and time where it's a great time to be a doula because people are recognizing the limitations of Western medicine, the impersonalization of Western medicine, and the separation in Western medicine from the child, the mother, the family. They're not looking at it from an integrated perspective. So if we're strategically preparing more and more culturally sensitive doulas to go out into the community, I think throughout the country, that ripple, it's like you throw a stone and a pebble in the river and it creates a ripple effect. This is one retreat, the first retreat in New Mexico. This can be replicated nationally. And I think that, it will grow because the need is there and there are people that want to go out and do this work, recognizing they need more tools, more resources, more understanding, more training, and more support from one another. One of the presenters was a grief doula, and she focused on the varying stages and types of grief. And it was interesting because people often associate grief only with death. And she talked about varying experiences with grief. Yes, we experience grief with the death of a loved one. We experience grief with a separation from someone, whether they move away and we lost contact, or they're suffering from incarceration. But no one talks about grief that you have when you have a miscarriage. People expect you to kind of get over it. And so Dee, the grief doula, talked about all the varying ways that grief impacts us. And it really struck a nerve because the tears ran, many, many women in there, many people in the room, not just women, had a extremely emotional experience. The tissues were passed out, the hugs were given, and a new connection was formed. For me, it triggered emotions about different challenges that I've experienced and losses that I've had that you carry within you. And sometimes you carry these within you 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And it was healing. Yeah, it was really healing to be able to let some of those emotions out and understand their source.
So if somebody is pregnant and they walk into a clinic and they are not treated respectfully, in combination with how that person may be treated in society as a whole, and we're talking about racism, we're talking about discrimination, maybe because of language, identity, gender, place of birth, all of those things. So the stress that that pregnant person has experienced over the course of their life and during their pregnancy, the combination of those things is what causes death. It's what leads to mental health disorders. It's what leads to substance use orders or challenges. Um, and it also alienates people from healthcare. You don't want to go into a facility or to see a provider when you know you're not going to be treated fairly. Or even if you have a history of being treated unfairly, you are less likely to trust medical professionals. So those are the reasons why this program is important. We know representation matters. And so our cohort, this first cohort for our Earth certified birth and postpartum attendants is all BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The LGBTQ and community is also a big part of this. We have trans families and queer families and Black families and Indigenous families and families of all different spiritualities. And our students represent the diversity of New Mexico so that we know once they are fully trained and out there that wherever they are, whether it's Las Cruces or Albuquerque or Santa Fe or Española, that we are putting more providers into the community that look like the people in the communities. Also,
the New Mexico Doula Association is an association that attempts to represent doulas across New Mexico, but through a birth and reproductive justice focused lens. And through that, and through COVID, being locked out of the hospitals for 2 to 3 years, we went online and we decided that what we couldn't do in the hospitals, we could come together and create solutions across the state. And it allowed us to connect all different people from all different walks of life, all different lived experiences, to come together and start creating those solutions for ourselves. So this is something I can't wait to talk a lot about in the future. But this is groundbreaking. There is no other doula training in the nation that I'm aware of that is like this. This training is so much more comprehensive. And even as we dive into the 16 weeks with a weekend workshop intensive, we still only scratched the surface of all there is to learn in this work. And so, in my opinion, our intention was really to set a standard for what would it look like to center community-based, rooted community doulas and set that as the standard for doula care rather than these more mainstream weekend trainings and then you kind of become a doula and go in. This training is a model, I think, really, for what a training could look like. And I think that this cohort is so powerful and that doing this course in this way has created relationships that will endure the test of time. And it was one thing to be online and to start that way, and then to come together in person. And it's like you've known each other forever. The first day, it's a little, unique, getting to know everybody, everybody's nervous. But then the relationships that are being formed, hearing the laughter, the joy in the midst of this deeply spiritual, deeply personal work, and laughter and tears, right? Like these are experiences that change your life so that you can go out and change the lives of the people that you work with.
I went into a hospital when I first moved out here because I was having severe pain in my lower abdomen. I didn't know what it was. And so I went in and they thought it might be a gynecological issue. And so they're checking me. And the way that the providers looked at me did not make me feel welcome. It did not make me feel safe. Their conversation um, didn't feel good. And because of that, I was very hesitant to use many of the providers that were technically accessible. And so I sought out women of color specifically. I came to New Mexico pregnant with our fifth child. I mean, our fourth child, sorry. And I sought out midwives and doulas that were of color. There is a network throughout this country. And so I reached out to the network and I'm like, who's here in New Mexico? And instead of having one midwife or doula of color, I had three. I had a surgical nurse who was a lay midwife, Kaya Selassie. I had Nandi Andrea Hill, who is the only home birth midwife in our state, Black home birth midwife in our state, and she traveled an hour to come and take care of me and to do my prenatal checks and all my appointments. And I had another beautiful midwife named Michelle, but incredible midwives that made me feel safe, that I felt like I could trust, that came with herbs and nutritional meals. And there was never a moment where they made me feel uncomfortable, like I had to change the way that I speak or um, prove myself in any way. A lot of times when you go into a hospital, if you are not of a certain educational status, you may be looked at like you are not knowledgeable about your own body when none of that should even matter. It doesn't matter how much education you have. Nobody is the expert over our bodies more than we are. And so that's something that was instilled in me by midwives of color, is that no, you're the expert. You know what your body needs. You know when you're not feeling right. It's our responsibility to tell our providers, and it's our providers' responsibility to address those concerns. And the challenge in a lot of Western and white arenas is that we're not listened to, we're not heard. When we say something doesn't feel right, it's not investigated. And so I encourage everyone to actually use the word investigate. If something doesn't feel right, don't tell the doctor it doesn't feel right. Say, I'm feeling this, and I would like you to investigate this further. Like, that's a message that needs to get out there so they know that's what you're asking for. I need to be checked. We need to go deeper with this and explore what's going on. And that's how we save lives. When we don't, we end up with people that have preeclampsia. And they're telling their providers what they're feeling, but when the provider's not listening, we lose a mother to that. We lose a birthing person to that. Stats, which one is New Mexico, we've closed 6 maternity wards in our state in the last year. We have pregnant folk around the state, some that are traveling over a hour and a half to get prenatal care. And it's unacceptable. It's not right. It's a whole other, like, I don't even know what to say about that. Like, how do you close 6 maternity hospitals in a state that has maternal mortality statistics like ours? Yes, yes, it is still going. And yes, it definitely, I mean, there have been tears, there's been joy, there's been laughter, there's been gathering at our elder CC's home. So a very relaxed environment where everybody could open up and feel safe and experience some good West African cooking and connect. We shared stories over dinner. We shared jokes and just really are taking the all of this time to really enjoy each other. And yeah, I think we're making some good medicine and magic as a group. You know, we're honoring what I believe our ancestors would have wanted, not just for us, but for themselves, which is community. And so one of the primary focuses of this program is love, because we know when we come from a place of love that we really can help anyone through anything. You don't have to have um, a plethora of knowledge, right? That can come over time. What you do need to have is an open heart. You're working with families during some of the most intimate times and experiences of their lives, and one of the biggest transitional periods of their lives. And so to come from a place of love, um, yeah, all over the state, Las Cruces, Santo Domingo, Santa Fe, Española, Albuquerque, yeah, all over. So the furthest away is about 5 hours. We had a whole crew come up from Las Cruces. So we're very excited that we're reaching areas that are in need. Some of these areas had hospitals closed, and so we have doulas in this cohort from those communities. And our prayer and what we're putting out there in the universe is to keep growing that, to keep expanding that, because we need so many more. And we hope to track our birth workers and their families as well. We hope to, keep in touch with them. I can't imagine how giving more support would make a more challenging situation. So I am expecting to see better outcomes. I'm expecting to see more support from organizations and facilities and providers who have the means to fund these things. I'm expecting to see more of that because it is a requirement to save lives. It's not an option. Um, all of these human beings are important on this earth. So I think I talked a little bit about how we created the program, right? So we have a 16-week online training program. However, it didn't feel right for it to be me as the only facilitator or teacher, because I don't have all the tools. I have a good amount of tools, but there are other community members that are leaders and that are experts in their fields. And so we brought in a psychiatric nurse practitioner and a midwife. We brought in someone to do grief support. We brought in someone to facilitate diversity, equity, and inclusion training, yoga, Afro belly, and movement for birth workers, making tinctures, making belly bombs. Like we wanted to hit as many aspects of support as we could, and to do that, we needed other people. We needed community members, and so I'm so grateful for all of the people that have showed up and stood up. Shanika Malcolm, Nicole Danielle Morris. Who else do we have? Danielle Miller, Dr. Helen Tinsley, Sam Lee. Um, who am I forgetting? Dia Naya, Oriana Lee, and many, many, many others have come to lead sessions. So here at the retreat, as well as online, we'll have a facilitator come in and they focus in on their topic and build interactive studies. So I think that's one thing that um, we stand out in, is that this program is not taught by one person. It is taught.
I do just want to say that I am so honored to be a part of this space. This is really a revolutionary space. This is shifting the culture of New Mexico and providing a space for Black, specifically Black and Indigenous folks, to really take a larger control of the health of our communities. I'm so grateful to know Tantawi, to be a part of her community. Um, we both have children, and we do this for them, and for the people that will come after us. And I think she has set such a beautiful foundation in this workshop, to really shift the way we do the work in this community in New Mexico. And I think folks better hang on, because this is a journey that we are on, and it will not be stopped.
Great.
Um, I'll talk about birth justice and equity. And what I'm really moving towards is liberation for Black and Brown folks. Um, that we determine how we care for our community.
Yes.
We know what works. We don't need research to tell us what the problems have been and are. We know what they are because we've been living with them. And we've also been resisting them and creating new systems within our communities. And when you look at the programs that we create for us, by us, you see outcomes that are positive. And that's just a fact. That's not just like something to be debated. It is a fact. And so what we really need is a distribution of wealth back to the communities that built this country, so that we can continue to care for ourselves. An event like this is important because it gives um, the power back to our communities to care for ourselves. So currently, right now, what we have here in New Mexico is specifically Black and Indigenous folks, who are a very small percentage of the overall New Mexico population, and continue to have worse health outcomes and higher maternal and infant mortality rates compared to our white-bodied folks in this country or in this state. And so, what we know from the organizations that are already doing the work in this state that are Black and Indigenous led, we know that those organizations that are led by those communities are improving outcomes for those communities. And so, what this event does is provide more individuals that are Black, that are Indigenous, that are other BIPOC folks, um, empowering them, allowing them to have the education, the tools to do the work that's already being done so that it's being expanded across our communities. And that's important. It's crucial to the health of our communities, and to be clear, it's crucial to the health of New Mexico, because without us doing well, the state's not going to do well. Other folks aren't going to do well either. When I was one of the presenters, I'm a mother first and foremost. Um, I'm a Black woman. I have a lot of intersectionalities that I navigate in this world, and in particularly in New Mexico, where New Mexico is a state that has continued to uh, have Black and Indigenous folks be invisible. And I think we, as Black folks, and also Indigenous, some of our Indigenous partners and relatives, are really stepping more into the light and into the movement work. And when I do a presentation as a mother, as a Black woman, as a midwife, as a psych nurse practitioner, my work in general is through a liberation reproductive justice framework. So that is how I do all of the work that I do. It's also how I parent my kids and how I move through the world. And so when I give a presentation, my goal, my intention is to also really ignite that in the participants. Right. So this is not just about learning skills to care for folks that are pregnant and postpartum. That's a piece of it. But to care for the whole person, you have to be somebody who is liberation focused and reproductive justice focused. Because if not, you are then capitulating to white supremacy and to the capitalist system that's put in place to harm us. And so my intent always is to ignite that and to provide tools so that folks can have both the language, the tools, and that we're cultivating a community that's really a movement community to shift these things, to shift these systems and dismantle them if they need to be dismantled. So that's the intent when I do that. And I think most of my colleagues, my friends, my comrades, are the same. So when we are presenting, when we are giving information to our community, it's information that is going to provide them with both knowledge, love, and tools to shift and dismantle these systems so that we can actually care for ourselves and continue to thrive.
For me, especially now as a young father, this is the second time we've been up here to Santa Fe for an event like this. The first time my wife was still pregnant, the second time today, my daughter's 3 months old. It's important for her to grow up and to know that there's help out there for people who don't traditionally want to be in the hospital, don't traditionally want to go and say, well, the doctor said I needed this or the doctor said I needed that. I do strongly believe with my agricultural background, there's so many things that a woman's body can do that's so natural as far as delivering the child, feeding the child, nurturing the child. And I feel like Western medicine is a great thing, but it's sometimes crosses the boundaries. And there's things that we need to pump the brakes on so that we can allow for nature and for the natural thing to cause, for natural thing to happen.
Yeah, so the imprint that a child can get while it's in utero is huge. A lot of it comes from the chemical makeup of the emotions of the mom. A lot of the things that are going on within the household, a lot of things that the baby hears through the womb, which is one of the reasons why some people will say that you should play classical music and these high vibrational frequencies, and it tends to make the child more intelligent. That in itself is an indicator that the child can be impressed upon in the womb. So the imprinting, I mean, it starts from generations, from how the mother was raised, that imprints her, and then she will imprint the baby. How the father was raised, that will imprint the baby. So to be conscious of that imprinting, you need to understand as a parent how you yourself were imprinted. And that comes from what took place while the parent was in the womb, and also the imprinting that the parent picks up from just being in a particular society. All of those things can transform, or rather translate into the imprinting of the baby in utero, and even outside of utero. They say up to the age of 7, those are the most impressionable years of a child, where the child really forms their personality, their being.
I like when I'm easing someone into a writing workshop, there can be anxiety around finding words to put on paper and the pressure of what's the right answer and what's the wrong response. So I have found that just by squiggling, just by drawing a doodle or a spiral, or even just making sure your pen never stops moving for 90 seconds, 2 minutes, it just opens up something neurally. It gets you kind of in your body and in this playful space. It kind of makes things feel like, okay, I'm doodling, I'm making art, this is not serious. And I like to do that so the seriousness and that trauma we can carry from schooling that said there's a right way and there's a wrong way to do this, I think that helps kind of throw that out the door and opens people up to just play with words and not be stressed out. About me, I'm like, okay, that's pretty. Hello, I'm so happy to be here, and I am grateful to walk into the space. I just left your room up there. I could tell that you went to some deep heart spaces, and there was a lot of vulnerability and love and sadness and joy, and I want to honor that you're moving out of that space. So I thought coming outside might be good. My writing workshops are not for writers. My writing workshops are not going to ask you to bust out a poem or go back into similes and metaphors and grammar and sentence structure. We're not doing any of that. So I just want to say that first. If anyone is over here being like, writing,
but yet we all can relate to each other and connect with one another and grieve together.
beautiful.
I'll share. It was when Dee took my breath away when she started talking about being raised in her mother's grief, and it really tapped into my connection to my mother and thinking about her and her grief.
I think the participants are walking away with a wholeness, that they can show up fully themselves and bring all their life experiences, all their love, heart, and even the hard stories to approach their community and provide loving support. I think they're walking away with context to like touch into the spiritual parts of themselves where they haven't been touching into that, like remembering and being reminded that we're not doing this work alone, that we're doing it with one another, and that we're also doing it with our ancestors and the ones that came before us. I feel like they're getting an opportunity to heal, to grow, to move, to reflect, and yeah, and they're also growing this family, this sisterhood, I think, which is beautiful.
I learned before I went into labor with my last baby is about limbic imprinting. It's something that I really didn't have much knowledge of before. And when we say limbic, we're referring to a part of the brain. And it's the part of our brain that holds onto emotions, to memories, to feelings, to experiences. And when we say imprinting, we're normally talking about the early stages of these emotions and experiences. Like what our parents were feeling when we were conceived, like what our mothers were feeling when they carried us in their womb. Were they happy? Were they sad? Were they hurting? Were they abused? What their every thought was, with their every emotion, this was transmitted to us while in uterus. And then during our birthing process, how were our mothers made to feel? Were they made to feel cared for? Were they made to feel loved? Or were they made to feel like patients that had a medical sickness that needed to be cared for? You know, all of these things were transmitted to us during birth and affect our birthing process. So a cycle begins, because at one time, everybody was born at home. My father-in-law was born in a cornfield. And he's okay. He's with us today. And at some point in our evolution, we begin to believe that we could not have babies naturally. So this was something that was imprinted on us through our mothers, through their mothers, and through their mothers. And we begin to believe that we could not have our babies at home, that we could not have our babies amongst midwives, that we needed assistance. And this is definitely not the case. You know, it's a very peaceful thing to have a baby. It's a very extraordinary experience. You know, babies are born throughout the world every day, and they're fine, and they're healthy, and they're strong. And it's because they have a warm setting to be born in. When we can begin to heal our limbic imprinting, when we can begin to heal our birth trauma, the things that happened to us during our birth, then we can begin to have births that are healthier, that are safer, and that are closer to home, if not at home. You know, we have many options to have birth at home. You can have an unassisted birth. You can have a birth with a midwife. You can have a birth with a doula who's a labor coach. You can have a birth with your friends and your family, with your children present or not present. You have choices, and that is one of the reasons why we're doing this documentary, to let you know that you do have choices. Because now what's being presented to us is the only safe way to have a baby is in a hospital, and it's simply not true. You know, many studies have been done that show that it's actually safer to have a baby at home, that the outcomes are better to have a baby at home. And these are things that will change as we change our thoughts and our limbic imprinting. As we begin to heal, we will see that, you know, it's a very easy, smooth, transforming, empowering experience.
Go.
Okay, Owen was born at home. We were living in Ridgefield Park, New Jersey at the time. And we had just came back from Ethiopia, which is where he was actually conceived. He came back in my belly. And we were seeking a midwife at the time, but we didn't have many funds when we came back, and the funds that we had, we knew we needed to live. So we couldn't afford a midwife at the time. And we decided that we were going to have this baby ourselves, just the two of us, that we were going to make this happen. And we did a lot of research, and we did a lot of studying, we did a lot of talking to people via the internet who had had births at home. And, you know, there was no option. This was the only way for us. So we knew that we had to make it happen. And the pregnancy was challenging because we were getting settled. It was like we came back from Ethiopia as immigrants. You know, we had 5 bags to our name, and that was it. And we had to start from scratch. So the birthing process for Owen was similar. You know, we had never had this experience. We were starting from scratch. We were learning ourselves. We were learning about each other. We were learning about how our bodies work. We were learning about how nature works, how nature will take its course whether you intervene or not, you know. And when you don't intervene, it's a much smoother, much more surreal experience. We're making this documentary because there are so many women who are giving birth in the hospital under conditions that are really not necessary. In the U.S., the cesarean rate has raised from 1 in 3 pregnancies are now a C-section. In the majority of the world, women are still having babies at home with midwives. And I just feel that it's the safest, most natural way to have a child. You know, if we look at the animal kingdom, animals are born without very many complications. Of course, there's the rare complication, But for the most part, there are no complications when animals have birth. They go to a quiet place, they make a bed of leaves or a bed of straw or just something that makes them feel soothing and comfortable, and that's where they give birth. And it's not very different for humans. We want to be in a safe place, we want to be in a comfortable place, we want to be in a place where there's people around us who love us, who appreciate us. And when we're in that setting, we can have babies more smoothly, more peacefully, more naturally. In a hospital, doctors are trained in pathology. So they're looking for a problem. They're seeking a problem to the situation. No matter what's going on with the pregnancy, no matter if the pregnancy is healthy, if the labor is progressing smoothly, they feel they have to do something. Where a midwife's perspective is that you don't have to do anything. You just allow the woman to be. And when she needs something, she can let you know. And we feel that it's just the most comfortable, smooth way to have a baby.
But to actually see birth is unsurpassed in its ability to let you know who you are in relationship to the universe. So what we want to do once again with this video is just get across the possibility that we want you to explore in terms of having a natural birth. I myself, along with my wife of course, have had 2 home births, and after the first home birth I said to myself, I can't see it happening any other way, because the peace that was within myself and within my wife, and the peace that I saw within my child after being born, was something that I wasn't accustomed to. The only thing that I knew was a hospital birth, almost like it was a medical procedure. But I remember somebody telling me the baby's gonna come out no matter what you do. And that kind of impressed upon me the fact that it's really out of my hands. This is something that's going to take place whether or not I know how it's going to take place, or I'm technically trained to, bring the baby out. The baby's going to come out on its own. What I would say is the care that the mother gets during the prenatal care is very important, and that can influence how the baby is born. The tranquility of the pregnancy for the mother and the father influences how the baby is born. So all of those factors we're going to talk about in this video, and we hope you enjoy it.